can see. Okay, good. So before we do anything today, I'm going to show you, I'm going to talk about how much control you can have with EC2 instances. Sometimes the question that we get pretty often, I mean, is what's the difference between RDS and EC2 instance or EC2 in terms of databases? Well, here you have it, right? So there are three different ways to um, work with the database, right? So you can have a database on premise, right? When you're in the office, you have your servers, and then you have your databases and all that. So we're not interested about that one, right? The one that we're interested in is the one in the middle, right? But I want to tell you about RDS. So we RDS, as you can see there, all the orange color is what AWS manages, right? So we know that AWS is a managed service, right? And Sergey, you're right. Amazon RDS custom is not there, right? But that's not the point, right? That's not the point. The point is to show you how much control you have with EC2. So um, you can install a database in EC2, right, and have a lot of control, right, because you're the one installing it, you're the one creating the tables and everything, and that's exactly what we're going to do today, right? So you see that with EC2 you have more control basically than what AWS has, right? You see more white colors than that orange. So you have control the optimization of the app. You have to make sure that the database scales, right? High availability, the backups of the database, the patches of the software, the install of the software, and the patches of the OS. So basically, it's the same as if you have a web server on EC2 instance. So that's the control that you have. In AWS, we take care of the power, the heat, ventilation, the air conditioning, the rack and stack, server maintenance, and the OS installation. So with that said, we're going to be playing around with the EC2 instance and we're going to see how much control we can have with it, right? So that's what I wanted to show you before we do anything today, right? So we're going to get my hands dirty here, and I want to show you how you can install an EC2 instance. In an EC2 instance, you can install a MySQL server, and we're going to create tables and create a database, and then we're going to utilize a third-party tool, which is MySQL Workbench, and we're going to connect to that too, and we're going to see how what we do in the bench affects what we have in the EC2 instance or vice versa. Okay, so feel free to ask any questions in the chat. If you see something that is not clear or is confusing, I'd be more than willing to stop and explain to you guys what I did, why I did it, right? Or maybe if I don't see the question in the chat, some of my colleagues can jump in and answer the question. Okay.
Hey,
So
Dunieski,
go ahead.
just how did you get here? I want to start from scratch.
Okay. Good. Good. Very good. So let me yeah, that's a good point. Very good. I'm gonna go to, for those who are not familiar with the console, there are multiple ways to look for a service once you're logged in, but I want to start from the beginning. So I'm gonna go over here. Just bear with me here. I'm gonna get this URL, right? This URL here. I'm gonna log out, right? And I'm going to paste this. So this is basically when you create an IAM user, right? When you create an IAM user, AWS provides you with a URL that already contains either the account number or the alias, right? And that's the URL that you're going to provide to your users, right? So that's what they're going to put in the browser. So now when I hit enter, I see here that the alias is already provided, right? If you don't have an alias, then the account number is going to be provided here. And this is the way, and I'm sure that you guys that are here and studying for the Solutions Architect Associate, you know what an IAM user is, right? I can assume that at this point, right? And if you're not familiar with that, then an IAM user is a user that you create, right? And then they have certain privileges. You attach a policy, which is a document that contains permissions, right? And that user is gonna do whatever the user is allowed to do, right? Based on the permissions that he has, right? Now, there are multiple ways that you can log in. You can log in as a root user, right? Which is not recommended for production, right? So the real user is not, it contains all the permissions that you can never have, right? So what it's recommended is to create an IAM user, give the user administrator privileges, and then log in as that user. And that's basically what I'm doing here, right? So my username is Dunieski, and the password is the following. So once I'm in, then I'm logged in, right? So basically, like I said before, this is the URL that you provide to your users right here, right? IAM users are created here, right? I have two users, Dunieski and Workshop. This is the one that I'm using, okay? Now, now that we're here, there are multiple ways that you can search for a service in the AWS console. If you have recently visited the service is going to show here because this is related to your cookies in your computer. So this is just like RAM memory. Once you clear the cookies, it is gone, right? But as I visited EC2 before, it's going to show here, and then I can click here and go to the EC2 console, right? And I can also click here and on the compute, right? I can find EC2 right here, right? Or there's another way. I can simply type EC2 here and it will give it to me. So multiple ways to go to the dashboard for Amazon EC2. Okay. So now that I'm here, I'm going to click here and then this is going to take me to the dashboard, right? A very good point, Jonah. I liked it. So that should have done that from the beginning. Good, good. So now that I'm here, right, I can either click here if I want to create an instance. An instance is just a server, an EC2 server, okay? Or I can come here and click in launch instances. So I'm going to come here and launch an instance, right? That's going to take me to the wizard where I create my EC2 instance, right? My server. And again, if you have any questions, just post your question in the chat or simply come off mute and ask me. Okay. So I'm gonna call this instance demo EC2 instance. Okay. I'm gonna call it that way. Then I scroll down and I have to look for the image, machine image, Amazon machine image, which is basically the operating system that we're using for this instance. Okay. In this case, I'm going to use Linux. I can use Mac OS. I can use Ubuntu. I can use Windows, Red Hat, SUSE Linux, Debian, whatever, right? Whatever operating system I'm using. But in this case, I'm using Amazon Linux AWS. Okay. And once I choose that, where's the image is coming from, right? It's going to show me some images here that I can use, right? I'm gonna utilize the one that is in the free tier just in case you guys want to reproduce this later, right? You're not gonna be charged because you have 12 months for free, right? And you have um uh I think it's 250 hours a month to go with I'm not sure. I think it's 250 hours. It's someone in the chat, one of my colleagues have that answer. I don't remember well, but it's somewhere there, 350 hours per month that you can utilize for free if you are within the free tier. Okay. Now we scroll down and we choose this one, which is the one by the free tier, like we said, and we have to choose the instance type. So basically, this is the part when you choose how many virtual CPUs you want, how many gigabytes of memory you're going to use, what's the family of the instance type. In this case is T, which is a burstable type. So basically, T is this the family, two is the generation, and micro is the size at 750 hours. Thank you, Pat. I was in the 50, but I didn't remember it was 750. Okay. Um, so basically, you can host and you can host a web server for free, right? If you keep it running for 24 hours for 31 days, you're gonna be in the 744 hours more or less. So you're still free. Okay. Now, a key pair is a pair of keys, right? That you can utilize as a public and a private key, right? And this is what gonna is gonna let us allow us to SSH or to access the EC2 instance. So that's something that you cannot do with RDS because RDS is fully managed service. You don't have access to the underlying infrastructure, right? But with EC2 as it is infrastructure as a service, you have a lot of control, and then you can access the instance, right? So I already have one key, right? And I'm gonna use this. If you want to create a key, right? There's a way you can create it. You give it a name, right? You're going to select the key pair type if it is RSA or ED25519, right? This is for encryption, right? And the type of file, the file format. It's going to be a PEN, usually for Linux and Mac OS, and then PBK for Windows, right? And then you have to use PuTTY, which is a third-party tool that you can use to SSH into the instance. As I'm using in my computer at the moment, I'm gonna create a PEM file. Well, I created it already. That's what I created, a PEM file, and I'm gonna use it in my terminal, right? Remember, if you're using Windows, that will be with the format PBK, right? So I selected my key. It's right here, and then here I can go ahead and select what type of network settings I'm gonna have. In this case, I can either edit here and kind of change the preferences, right? But this is not going to be important because this is not a web server, right? But as it is, an EC2 instance that we're going to SSH into, we need to have a public IP. If we don't have a public IP, we're not going to be able to SSH into that. So we're going to keep it the default settings, which is using the default VPC, right? Which you can have a custom VPC as well, but in this case, we are using the default VPC, and we're going to let EC2 choose the subnet where the EC2 instance is going to be launched in. Okay. We can enable auto assigned public IP because we need a public IP to SSH into this instance. Now, with the security group, which is the firewall that's going to protect this EC2 instance, I'm going to leave it the way it is because by default, it opens the port for the port 22, which is SSH, right? And it's going to let us access the account. Now, in terms of the source, right? It's just here has all the IPs in the world. So this is not good practice. You should never let everybody have access to your instance via port 22, right? So you should change this, right? So maybe we can remove this and then create another one and then choose SSH here, right? And then here we're gonna select my IP, right? So it's gonna let my IP only, right? So or a range of IPs, which is very important, whitelisted IPs that you have there, and only they will be able to access that, right? So there's nothing else that we need to do here. We don't need to touch any of this. This is for advanced details and settings. We're not using any role. We're not joining any directory. We're not doing any of this. We're not installing anything here in the user data section. So basically, we can go ahead and um, launch the instance, right? We are in the free tier, as you can get here, and we get up to 30 gigabytes of EVS general purpose volume or magnetic storage, right? Remember, 750 hours and up to 30 gigabytes of EBS volume for general purpose. That's inside the free tier, right? So let me go ahead and launch this instance. And while the instance is being launched, I want to ask if someone has any questions at the moment. Anyone has any questions? Questions whatsoever?
I mean, it may be a general one, but for the instance name, it's not like the S3 bucket names. It's not like a global name. You can name it if
That
somebody
is
else has the same name. You can.
that is correct.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
for S3 bucket, it's globally unique. For EC2 instance, it's just you can have multiple instances with the same name. It doesn't matter, right? In fact, a name is a tag, right? And when we want to have a tag called production, you may have multiple instances that are in production. So you want to name them all the same, right? So you can
Okay,
identify them sooner and quicker, right?
cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Good. So now we're here. We are this EC2 instance is running. We have public IP and we have a public DNS name. Okay. So let me copy this. Well, I'm gonna need it, right? To SSH into the instance. Let me go here to my terminal, right? And I'm going to SSH into my terminal. So if you take a look, I have some suggestors installed. So as soon as I hit SS, it gives me all this. So I can do this, right? And I'm gonna paste this here. So basically, the way that this works, I'm using the SSH command, right? I'm using the I option here, and I'm using the key that I created, which is in my desktop, right? And of course, when you create the key, you have to give the key permissions because the key is it doesn't have any permissions, so you have to do that, right? And you have to use the chmod command to be able to give the key permissions. This case, this is not important at the moment. The key already has permissions, right? But just for your information, if you want to use that, um, let me see this. That will be this command, right? So that's basically how you give permissions to the key, right? So you give permissions for the user to execute and utilize this key, right? If you're not familiar with this system to give permissions, you can find information online and um, be able to log in and find how to give permissions with the chmod, which means change mode um, to a particular key or file, right? So I'm going to SSH. Now it's asking me to if I want to continue connecting, yes or no. I say yes, and now I'm inside my instance, and I'm gonna hit the command clear to clear the screen, right? I'm gonna make it bigger so you can see it better, right? So this is the user, EC2. So if I say who am I or who am I, that's gonna tell me EC2 user, right? So it's telling me the user that is connected. If I use the who command, the same. If I use this command, is going to tell me also who the user is. So multiple ways to know the user that is logged in, right? Good. Let me go ahead now and install the MySQL server. So I have some commands here that I'm gonna paste because they're a little long, right? So with this command, so basically we're fetching that data right from the MySQL 57 community release, right? And that's going to give us some way to begin installing that command, that tool, right? I'm going to create put this command again, another one, and you see it's installing this. Now I've noticed that there's an issue with one of the keys when you install this, or I have to use this command RPM to be able to import the RPM GPG key, right? To be able to install finally the community server, MySQL community server. Okay. So guys, if you don't understand this, don't worry. This is just the way that we install the server. And then the important thing is when we have the server installed, how we can control that inside the EC2 instance. Okay. So now this is installing the MySQL community server. And now we have to wait a little bit, right? It's installing it. And now what we have to do is start the service because the service is not started, right? It's idle, and we have to enable it. And that's what we're going to do now. Okay. Every time that you make a change to your services, you have to restart the server, right? Like you would do with a computer. Sometimes uh, you change something in your computer and it needs a reboot to be able to for those services or those changes to take effect, right? Now that I have this, I'm gonna go ahead and this is gonna do it manually because it's a short one. So I'm using sudo because I'm not a root user, so I need root user permissions to be able to do this. I'm gonna say systemctl, and this is the command that is used to control the services, right? I'm gonna say start, and the service that I've just installed is MySQL D, which is a service, right? So usually when you install something, it ends with D. If you install SSH, it's going to be SSHD. If you install MySQL, so you can see there, it's going to be MySQL D. I'm going to start that, right? So that's been started. Okay. And I'm going to enable now. Enable it, right? Because it's disabled by default. Now I can use the same command, but instead of saying the sudo command enable, I'm going to say status, right? Show me that it's running. As you can see here, the MySQL server, it's running. Okay. Now we can go ahead and do our thing with the database. Okay. Now, when you install MySQL, right, a temporary password is provided to you, right? But it's not just given to you just like that. Where is it? It's right here. No, you have to fetch it because it's deep inside in the MySQL d.log file. We need that password because we need to log in into this server, right? Now, I'm going to use this command. But first, I'm going to go ahead and utilize this and try to log in using the root. The U stands for user, and then the root is the root user, right? And I'm going to provide a password. As you can see, I don't have a password, right? So I have to fetch that temporary password, log in with that password, and reset the password so it can be a password that I can remember because the one provided has a lot of strange characters that I won't remember, okay? So let me go ahead here and let's say exit here and good. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and fetch that. So I'm going to say sudo, and this is a command that is used to fetch patterns, right? So I want to find in a particular file where you can see this temporary password, right? So fetch whatever information you have that contains this temporary password. And that's going to be in the var, which is a folder, and the log is a folder too. And there's a file inside, which is MySQL d.log. And that's going to contain the temporary password. As you can see here, a temporary password is generated for root localhost, and this is the password, right? I'm going to copy this password, and I'm going to come here and run the same command that I did before. And I can just move around with the up arrow, right? Or down arrow, right? So I don't have to copy just paste or type the same thing again, right? So I'm going to utilize this again. Now that I do this, I do have a password, which is this one, right? I'm going to go ahead and do this. I paste it. It doesn't have an echo, so you will not see anything, but the password is there, right? So now I have entered the MySQL environment, right? I can see the databases if I want. Right? I can say show databases, right? And because I don't have a database. Okay, that's fine. I have to reset the password. That's what I wanted to do before, right? So I'm gonna utilize this command here. I'm gonna say, okay, let's alter, right? This particular user, and what is the user root, right? And then it's gonna be in the local host because this is in the local host of the EC2 instance, right? And we're going to say identified by, and this is when we put our password, our new password. So I'm going to say that the new password is going to be p at ss password 1976. That's going to be my password. Okay. So you have to follow the policy, the password policy. It has to have a special character. That's why I have this @ symbol here. Okay. Now if I hit enter, you must reset the password before executing this statement. Okay. That's what I'm doing here. Right. Do I have any problem here? Okay. Alter user, root at localhost. Oh, I forgot the L in the localhost, as you can see here. So I have to do it again, right? So root local host, I forgot the L. That's very important, right? Identify by, and then the password ends in semicolon. So I'm going to say password 1976. Let's see now. There you go. Now we have a password, right? So we say exit, and then we try to log in again. I can use up arrow again, and I try to log in now, and I use the password that I just created, right? 1976. Perfect. I'm logged in with the new password. Okay. So now I can ask show databases, right? What databases do I have? I have information schema, MySQL performance schema. Okay, good. But I'm going to create a new database. So I'm going to use this command, create database demos, right? And that created a database. Perfect. And I can go ahead now and show databases again. Databases. And I see demos there, right? Demos. Good. So I am manipulating my database from my EC2 instance. I'm going to do something now. I'm going to connect to a third party, right? In this case, it's going to be MySQL Workbench, right? And I'm going to create a new connection, right? And as I'm using AWS Amazon EC2, I have to connect through SSH, right? So I have to SSH into this, right? And I'm going to give it a name. So I'm going to say my EC2 connection, right? And the SSH host name is going to be the public IP of my EC2 instance. So let me copy this, right? That is the host name. Or it could be the public DNS as well, but I like to use the public IP, right? So I'm going to put this here, right? The user, remember our user is going to be EC2 user. That's the one that we had in our, sorry, here before. If we can take a look, it was EC2 user, as you can see here, right? That's the one that is logged in, right? And I'm going to use the key that I downloaded. Remember the key pair, right? It's my key pairs right here, right? And my SQL host name is going to be my local host. The root is going to be the user, and the password is the one that I just created, right? So now I say, okay, I test the connection. It says this, I don't care. And the successful made a connection. Good. So now I have this. Okay, I have to change because I have another MySQL instance. Let's say new. Okay. Now I have new here. I double click here, right? It's just opening the editor. And there you go. So if I check the schemas, demo is there. You see demo? Okay. Let me go back to this here, right? And create another database. And you will see database, okay, test. Okay. That created a new database. If I refresh this, right, refresh all, you see test, right? Now let me do something here. Let me go ahead and create a table. Okay, I'm going to say create table. And don't worry if you're not familiar with the SQL syntax. This is a SQL language, which is query, which is structured query language with data for SQL databases or relational databases, right? So I'm going to create a table and I'm going to call the table users, right? I hit enter. I just put a parenthesis because everything has to be inside parentheses, all the columns that table is going to have, right? I'm going to say user ID, right? It's going to be an integer, right? And it's going to be the primary key, which is the unique key that identifies every single row in the table, right? That's going to be, and it's going to be auto increment. It means that I don't have to worry about the increment of this user ID, right? I use a comma between columns, okay? And I'm going to say user first name. It's going to be a varchar, which is basically the type for text, and it's going to have 15 characters just in case the name is long. I don't just to play safe, right? And it's going to be not null. It means that that field has to be populated. It's a must, right? It's not optional, right? I'm going to say user last name. It's going to be a varchar too because it's a text, right? And it's going to be 15 not null as well, right? And then I'm going to have a last field, which is age. That's going to be a small int, because age, a person lives the longest, probably 122 years. I saw a woman that still alive. She's 121 years, I think. So a small int goes from, I think it's go from minus 250 to minus to positive 250, right? So a small int can be used here. And that's going to be not null as well, right? Now, I use capital letters because that's the standard in MySQL, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and then I close the parenthesis and I put a semicolon, right? That's how you finish a MySQL statement, right? We go ahead and create the table, and we have, oh my God, I didn't select the user, the database. So I have to say demos, because you have to identify first what database you're using, right? So I'm using demos now. It changed the database, and now I have to do the same thing. Oh my God. I cannot use the up arrows here? Yes, I can. Why not? So now I go ahead and I have a syntax problem here. What the heck? A number line? Okay, let me do this again. So I'm going to say create table users. And then I open parenthesis and say user ID real quick. ID and then int primary key auto increment, and then we say username, and that's it. And I'm not gonna spend so much time here, but you guys get the idea, right? And that name is gonna include first name and last name, right? Not no, and then vh, right? Int not no. That's gonna close the parentheses, and then we say this. We shouldn't have any problem there. There you go. It created a table. Now, if I say show tables, which is the command to show the tables, there you go. We have users, right? So let me go ahead and go back to this guy here, and let me refresh the database. And I will see that I have a table, users. It's right here, right? So now if I say use demos, right, and I say describe users, it would tell me what types this has, right? It shows me user ID is an integer, is not null, it's the primary keys as auto increment. Just exactly what we did before. So this is the command that we use to describe a table, right? Let me go ahead now and insert information in that table. I'm going to say insert into user, which is the table name. And then the columns that I'm going to use is the username, because I don't have to specify the user ID because that's auto increment. That's going to increment the number automatically. So I don't have to specify the column there. I'm not going to enter that data, right? username and then user age, right? So now I'm going to say, what are the values that I'm going to utilize here? Okay, I'm going to put multiple values here. So I'm going to say Dunieski Otano, which is my name, right? I'm going to say, and my age is going to be 46, right? I have another person, maybe Joel Sante, right? And then that's going to be 23, right? Right? And maybe another person. I'm going to say Julio Mujica, and that's going to be Julio is 45 years old, right? Then I say a semicolon at the end and 3 records were added. So now I have the table with 3 records, right? I can do this. I can go ahead and say, okay, let's see everything from the users table, right? And there we go. We have the information that we just entered, right? And I can go back to our dear workbench and say the same thing. And we can see that whatever we do from the CLI will be affecting this positively, of course, or negative. Well, we don't know. Depends on what we do, right? So there you go. You have all the information here, right? So we are doing this. Now let me go ahead and do something here. I want to create another database from this workbench, right? And I want to open a new SQL editor. I'm going to create this particular database, right? Right, and then we see the schemas here. We refresh this, and we are able to see there's another database called any company DB, right? Which is we can see as well here. Why not? Databases, right? And then we have any company DB. I'm gonna paste a bunch of things that I have here. So I'm gonna create 3 tables. One table is called customer, another is called orders, and another one is called products, right? So we have a lot of information here, which you don't have to worry about. It's just this is a SQL statements here that contains multiple tables. So I can run this one, customer, right? It's the same syntax as we did before, right? It's just a little longer and with different fields, right? And we are specifying this command here just in case the table doesn't exist, create it. If it exists, don't create it, right? So making sure that the table doesn't exist. So we get a positive, a green check mark here. It means that the table was created successfully. We have another one here. This is the product table. And then we have the audit table. Okay, there we have. And then we're going to insert the data for the customer. Let's insert the data, which has the same structures as we did before. 21 rows were affected, as you can see here. I'm going to insert the data for the product table, right? Perfect. And I'm going to insert the data for the orders table, right? And there you go. So everything is perfect here. Let me go back to my dear CLI. I love the CLI, guys. Let me go back here and let's say, okay, select everything from the customer table. Customer table. From customers in lowercase. The table doesn't exist. Oh, I have to use the any company DB, right? And then now I can utilize that. And there you go. We have the information from the customer table. It's a little big here, right? Because if I can make it smaller here, maybe we can see the table better. And there you go, right? So we can see the table that we have for customers, and I can see the table that I have for, I can use lowercase if I want for the commands. It's not case sensitive, right? I can say orders, right? Give me the orders. There you go. Empty set. Why empty set? So we have orders here. Okay. Orders. Okay. um, select from orders. Okay, let's say select from products. Products, right? There you go. Products working, right? So the table orders. Okay, select from orders. I don't think that orders inserted the data successfully. So let me go ahead and run this again. Okay, now it makes sense. Now I can say select from orders, and there you go. You have a bunch of orders there, right? And then you can do a join statement and bring all the tables together in one. So this is basically how you can manipulate a database from EC2 instances, right? You have all the control, I mean, most of the control in that particular server. You can install this, but you have some disadvantages. You have to make sure that this scales, right? Because what happens if this, you as a solution architect, associate exam students, what happens if this server goes down? What happens? Can someone tell me here? Maybe the chat, or maybe you lose your database. That makes sense, right? Right? At least you have a great downtime here. It's, you have to make sure that you have an auto scaling group, right? That can help you, and maybe a load balancer that can distribute the data to multiple, distribute the traffic um, to multiple in EC2 instances. And what is recommended is to have this database in a private subnet, right? And with an internal load balancer there, so no one has access to this database, right? So that was my demo today. I hope you understand, you understood, or you understand this a little bit better, how much you control you can have with an EC2 instance. And I hope you enjoyed it. And if you have any questions, you can ask now. I'm done here, right?